A millionaire comes across a street boy and freezes when he sees the boy wearing his missing daughter's necklace. He decides to follow him, and what the boy reveals turns his world upside down, exposing a dark secret. But what happens next is even more devastating than he could have ever imagined. The sky over the city looked grayer than ever. The constant honking, the idling cars, and the stifling heat inside the vehicle made everything feel more claustrophobic. But none of that mattered to Leonardo. He stared fixedly at the steering wheel, his hands trembling, his breath coming in ragged gasps. This was the third day without Alice. 3 days since his 7-year-old daughter disappeared after leaving school. 3 days of searching, unanswered phone calls, empty promises from the police. 3 days in which life had lost all meaning. The school said that someone, authorized by her father, had picked her up. But he never gave that authorization. Security cameras, broken, witnesses, none. Just a void that swallowed his sanity with every passing minute. A strangled sob tore through his throat when he glanced into the back seat and saw Alice's pink backpack, still there as if mocking him. This was a waking nightmare. The traffic light ahead finally turned green, but Leonardo didn't move. His attention was caught by something outside, on the right. A street kid, thin and dirty, was selling candy between the cars. He must have been about 12. What caught Leonardo's eye, though, wasn't the boy's grimy face or quick glance. It was the necklace hanging around his neck, a white gold butterfly pendant with a small pink stone in the center, one of a kind. Custom-made, a gift Leonardo had ordered for Alice's last birthday. There was only one like it in the world, and now it dangled from a stranger's neck. Leonardo blinked several times, unable to believe it. His heart pounded. He flung open the car door without thinking and nearly got hit by a motorcycle. Ignoring the curses and the idling traffic behind him, he ran. He ran like a man who had nothing left to lose. "Hey!" he shouted. "Kid, the necklace! Where did you get that necklace?" The boy looked up, eyes wide, and then he took off. Leonardo chased him. Down the sidewalk, weaving between cars, bumping into pedestrians. With each step, his mind spun between hope and terror. What if it was just similar? What if it really was Alice's necklace? The boy was agile, knew these streets. He cut through one alley, then another. Leonardo almost lost sight of him when he slipped in a puddle of dirty water, but he kept going. His suit jacket ripped at the sleeve, sweat soaking his shirt. After 5 blocks, the boy turned into a dead-end alley. He stopped. Gasping, he leaned against a wall like a cornered animal. Leonardo, his heart hammering in his chest, approached slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, voice more pleading than threatening. "That necklace, it's my daughter's. She's missing. Where did you find it?" The boy looked around as if searching for an escape route. He took a deep breath, hesitated. Then he spoke. "I found it. I swear I didn't steal it. She was with a girl, in an old warehouse." Leonardo froze. "She was unconscious. I was going to call for help, but I got scared. People think we're thieves, kidnappers. I just wanted to. She had a fever. I gave her water, gave her a blanket." "Do you know where she is, right now?" The boy nodded, eyes downcast. "Take me there, now." Without another word, the boy started walking. Leonardo followed, trying not to run so as not to draw attention. Their footsteps echoed through the narrow alleys until they reached an old industrial area of the city. The building was an abandoned warehouse, covered in graffiti, with broken windows and the smell of mildew. Over there, behind that pile of pallets. The boy, he said his name was Lucas, slipped through a gap in the rusty gate at the side. Leonardo nearly tripped in the darkness but kept moving forward. "There, see? Behind the pallets." Leonardo squeezed between the obstacles and then saw her, Alice, lying on a heap of tattered blankets, pale, hair matted to her forehead, eyes closed. Her necklace was missing. Leonardo knelt, the world spinning around him. "Alice, my God, baby." Her eyes fluttered open, glazed over. When she recognized him, tears slipped down her cheeks, silently. "Daddy, you came." Leonardo gathered her in his arms, afraid to hold her too tightly. She was alive, weak, but alive. Shaking, he took off his jacket and wrapped it around her, as if trying to shield her from all the world's pain. Lucas watched from a distance, leaning against a stack of boxes. His eyes, accustomed to the world's indifference, now witnessed something rare, a reunion, something he had never experienced. Leonardo stood up with Alice in his arms. Before leaving, he turned to the boy. "You saved my daughter. I won't forget that." Lucas only lowered his eyes. He said nothing. But in that moment, without knowing it, their lives had become forever intertwined. The ambulance siren sounded like a distant lament as Leonardo gripped his daughter's hand tightly, as if he feared she might vanish again. Alice was wrapped in blankets, her eyes half closed, her body still trembling despite the city's stifling heat. In the seat beside him, Lucas remained silent. His dirty hands rested on his knees, his gaze fixed on the ambulance floor. He didn't look scared, he looked accustomed. Accustomed to ambulances, to tense adults, to the feeling that something terrible had happened. At the hospital, the medical team rushed to tend to Alice. Leonardo hesitated for a moment when they asked him to wait outside the room, but he eventually complied. He paced in circles down the hallway, hands pressed against his face, trying to control the panic still pounding in his chest. Hours later, a doctor arrived, wearing a grave, exhausted expression. "She's stable," he said. "Dehydrated, feverish, with mild signs of sedation, but she'll recover." Leonardo collapsed onto the bench nearby. It was as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, only to be replaced by another, even more unsettling. "Did she say anything about what happened?" he asked. The doctor hesitated. "Very little. She's in shock. She'll need time and perhaps psychological support, but the most important thing is that she's alive." Leonardo nodded, his eyes brimming with tears. The next morning, Alice slept peacefully, monitored by machines that beeped softly. Leonardo watched her without blinking. It was still hard to believe she was there, just a few meters away, after the nightmare she had lived through. And then he remembered Lucas. He went back to the reception area and found the boy curled up on a wooden bench, arms crossed over his stomach. He was sleeping sitting up, as if he didn't know what a bed was. "Lucas," Leonardo called softly. The boy's eyes snapped open, startled, ready to bolt, but when he saw Leonardo, he simply curled into himself again. "You don't have to go anywhere. You can stay with me, at least for today." Lucas looked at him as if trying to decipher whether it was a trap. Then he nodded slowly. Leonardo's house felt too big for two strangers. While Alice remained hospitalized, Lucas was brought there. The mansion, silent and immaculate, stood in stark contrast to everything he knew. The plush carpets, the gleaming furniture, the hallways that were too empty. "There's real food here," Leonardo said, trying to sound casual as he handed him a plate of rice, meat and vegetables. Lucas picked up the cutlery as if handling a weapon. He ate slowly, warily, but he didn't leave a scrap on his plate. "Where do you live?" Leonardo asked after a few minutes of silence. "Nowhere." The reply came quickly, firmly. "Everywhere." Leonardo gave a sad half-smile. "How did you know how to take care of Alice like that?" Lucas shrugged. "I've seen worse people. When I saw her there, she just looked too wrong to ignore." Their eyes met for a moment. There was something between them. Not trust, not yet, but something more primal, recognition. Alice was discharged 2 days later. When she walked into the house, she hugged one of her stuffed bears so tightly that Leonardo wanted to cry. She didn't say much. She watched everything with big, frightened eyes, as if she expected to be ripped away at any moment. She slept little. She had nightmares, screamed in the middle of the night, and she cowered every time someone knocked on the door. Lucas kept his distance. He watched from afar but never forced her into anything. Sometimes he left little gifts in the hallway, a drawing, a stuffed animal he'd found on the street, a packet of cookies. One day, Alice picked up one of those gifts, sat down next to him on the floor and whispered, "You protected me." Lucas just nodded without saying a word. As the days passed, Leonardo began to notice details. Alice spoke in her sleep. Fragments, disjointed words, sometimes whole sentences that made his blood run cold. Uncle said he was friends with Daddy. He said he was going to take me somewhere nice. Then it went dark, and it hurt when I woke up. Leonardo listened from the hallway, unable to enter her room. It was more than he could bear. How had someone managed to deceive his daughter? How did they know her name, her routines, her schedule? Only someone very close could have accessed those details. That idea lodged itself in his mind like a parasite. One night, Alice asked Lucas to play. They took colored pencils and sheets of paper. They drew together on the porch, under the orange glow of the setting sun. Leonardo watched them from a distance, feeling something he hadn't felt in days. That street kid, who had appeared out of nowhere, was now the only person who could make his daughter smile. He walked over slowly and sat down beside them. "Alice, do you remember the man who took you?" She stopped drawing, her eyes fixed on the paper. "He said you sent him to pick me up. He had a file with my name, and a photo of my school. I thought it was real." Leonardo felt his throat go dry. "What was he like?" She bit her lip, the drawing trembling in her hand smudged under her fingers. "Tall, stubbly beard, strong smell, and he always wore gloves, even when it was hot." Leonardo exchanged a look with Lucas, who remained silent. Then the boy added, "I saw him go into the warehouse twice. He never saw me. I was hiding." It was like a blade cutting through the fog in Leonardo's mind. "Do you remember his face?" Lucas nodded. "Yes, and if I see him again, I'll recognize him." Leonardo stood up. For the first time since the kidnapping, a new feeling blossomed in his chest. Rage. Leonardo woke up with his face pressed against the papers scattered across his office desk. The coffee had gone cold, and the previous night felt like a blur. Ever since Alice was found, sleeping had become a distant luxury. She no longer screamed at night, but she still slept with the light on. Lucas, in the guest room, spent his nights in silence, reading old comic books or scribbling in notebooks he'd found around the house. A routine was beginning to emerge. But for Leonardo, something still didn't fit, and the police didn't seem interested in making the pieces fit. "We're investigating," they said. "It's a sensitive case." But he knew when they were just buying time and letting evidence slip through their fingers. He went to the school. He demanded to speak with the principal, with the security guards, anyone who had been on duty the day Alice vanished. The receptionist hesitated, but the weight of the surname Faraz still carried authority. "The camera system didn't record anything that day," the principal explained, clearly nervous. "We had scheduled maintenance. There was a general outage." How convenient," he replied dryly. "It was scheduled in advance, Mr. Leonardo, and nobody expected—" "And who authorized taking my daughter?" he interrupted. "A man presented a document. It had her name, her grade level, and what appeared to be your authorization with a digital signature." Leonardo frowned. "Can I see that document?" Minutes later, he was holding a laminated sheet bearing the school's letterhead. The signature underneath looked like his, perfectly so. He knew his own handwriting, and that signature was flawless, too flawless. No hesitation, no wavering, as if it had been copied. He photographed the document with his phone and left without saying goodbye. Back at the company, Leonardo locked himself in the conference room and accessed the internal systems. Something had been bothering him even before the kidnapping. A silent intuition that things were moving out of place without his noticing. He began to comb through digital approvals, recent contracts, emails sent in his name. Within minutes, he found the first discrepancy. A supply contract signed with a company he'd never approved. A large sum of money, his digital signature on it. Then came the banking records. Significant amounts transferred to unknown accounts, always around the date of the kidnapping. He summoned the finance director, who arrived with a strained smile. "Did I approve this contract?" Leonardo asked, pointing. "Yes, of course. You approved it digitally. I can check the log." "Do that?" As the man checked the records, Leonardo kept his eyes fixed on him. His hands were sweaty. The delay in the response. Small signs that only someone alert would notice. "It's here, sir. The authentication is in the files." Leonardo looked. The signature was there, stamped with a timestamp, IP address, everything seemingly in order. But he knew that day he had been at the hospital with Alice. He hadn't accessed any systems. "I want a complete audit of every contract from the past 30 days and bring me all the access logs. Now." Hours later, isolated in his office, Leonardo cross-referenced the data. The pattern formed like a macabre puzzle. The day Alice disappeared was the same day the unauthorized accesses began. While he was losing his mind searching for his daughter, someone was exploiting the chaos. An insider, someone with privileged access, or worse, someone who knew all of Leonardo's systems and personal routines. His phone rang. It was the IT manager. "Sir, you asked me to cross-reference the network accesses with the suspicious contracts, and I found something odd." "Speak." "There are login records in your name, coming from unregistered devices but with spoofed locations. It looks like IP cloning, and the attempt started 3 days before the kidnapping." Leonardo felt his stomach churn. "Someone planned this ahead of time." "Yes, sir, and they knew exactly what to do." He hung up without saying another word. He stared at his computer screen. Alice's photo, smiling in a park, glowed as his wallpaper. A two-fronted ruse. While they used his daughter as bait, someone was destroying everything he had built. That night, he sat on the living room couch, his gaze empty. Alice slept upstairs. Lucas, seated on the floor, was drawing in silence. Leonardo watched him for a few minutes. The boy seemed constantly on alert, eyes scanning every sound, every shadow, as if expecting something terrible to happen at any moment. "You said you saw the man who brought food into the warehouse, right?" Leonardo asked softly. Lucas nodded without looking up. "Do you remember how he spoke? Any accent? Slang?" The boy hesitated. He didn't talk much. He only said things like, "She's okay, stay out of it." And once I heard him yelling at someone on the phone, said something like, "The sucker still hasn't noticed." Leonardo leaned back in the armchair, the boy's words echoing in his mind. "The sucker still hasn't noticed." He took it personally. Now it was clear the trap had been set for him. His daughter, the kidnapping, the contracts, the accesses, everything, by someone very close, someone who knew exactly where it hurt, and knew exactly how to strike. And that person was still out there. The sound of the car's wheels rolling over the gravel in the driveway was almost inaudible, but to Leonardo it sounded like an alarm. He was in his office, surrounded by papers, when the gate notification popped up on his phone. Renato entered. Renato. The name hit him like a punch. His trusted driver, discreet, efficient, loyal, or at least that's what he had always believed. 10 years by his side. Not just driving back and forth, but listening to his conversations in the car, observing routines, protecting Alice with almost paternal care. And then, on the day everything fell apart, he was on vacation. Vacation. Something Renato never asked for. Never. Leonardo closed the folder in front of him, swallowing hard. A wave of unease washed over him. The coincidence had bothered him from the start, but he had refused to believe it. Until now. He heard the front door open. Steady, calm footsteps, as if everything were normal, as if the world hadn't collapsed in those days. Leonardo left his office and saw him, the same thin man, neatly trimmed grey hair, immaculate uniform, the same calm, neutral expression. "Mr. Leonardo," Renato said with a slight nod. "I heard about what happened to the girl. I'm so sorry. I couldn't be reached while I was away." Leonardo watched him in silence, his eyes trying to pierce that mask of serenity. "It was a strange coincidence. Your vacation, right that week." Renato didn't flinch. "I'd planned it months ago. Mrs. Marilia confirmed it personally with HR." Leonardo nodded, but something sounded rehearsed. The driver's excessive composure now felt like armor, something too polished. "Where exactly were you?" "In the countryside of Minas, at my brother's house. Almost no signal." Leonardo crossed his arms. He felt his heart pound faster, not out of fear, but out of suspicion. "Alice is recovering, but she said strange things, and Lucas, the boy who found her, did too." Renato raised an eyebrow. "The street kid?" "Yes, he saw someone going in and out of the warehouse where she was. A man. He described the beard, the smell, the gloves." Renato fell silent for a second. Then he furrowed his brow slightly. "And you think it was me?" Leonardo said nothing. He just stared at him. "After so many years, precisely because of that. You knew everything. Alice's routine, school's schedule, my accesses." Renato looked down for a moment, but when he raised his eyes again, there was something different on his face. It wasn't guilt, it was the shadow of something colder, an absolute control of his expression. "I understand your distrust. You're shaken, anyone would be, but I ask you to think calmly. I'm just the driver." Leonardo didn't answer. He felt as though he stood before a dark mirror, something that had always been there but that he never wanted to see. Later, while Alice played with a puzzle in the living room and Lucas watched TV in silence, Leonardo called the boy for a talk. They went to the backyard, away from Renato's ears. "Lucas, do you remember the man you saw in the warehouse?" Leonardo asked quietly. Lucas nodded. "I think so. I saw him twice, always at night, with bags and a flashlight. If you saw him again, would you recognize him?" Lucas lifted his gaze. He was steadier than before. "Absolutely." Leonardo pulled out his phone and opened a photo of Renato, a picture taken a few months ago, smiling next to the company's armored car. He showed the image without saying a word. Lucas stayed silent for 5 seconds, 10, then, "It's him." Leonardo felt his legs give way. "Are you sure?" "I never forget a face, or a smell, and he had both." The world seemed to shrink around Leonardo. The pieces of the puzzle fit together with cruel precision. Renato had vanished at exactly the right moment. Unrestricted access to his personal and professional life, and now back as if nothing had happened. That night, Leonardo did not sleep. Sitting in his office, he watched the company's network access logs. He wanted to see if Renato had left digital traces, but the man was careful. There was nothing direct, which made it all the more terrifying. Renato was not impulsive. He was meticulous, invisible, the perfect shadow for a crime of this magnitude. What was he after? Money, revenge, power? Leonardo closed his eyes for a second and then had a clear vision. Renato in the front seat, listening to his conversations for years. He knew all the meetings, the system accesses, the passwords. He knew where every contract was, who the most vulnerable executives were, who was loyal, who was expendable. He knew everything. The next day, Leonardo didn't go to work. He asked that no one inform Renato. He spent hours reviewing contracts, bank trails, employees' names, looking for something, anything, and he found it. A digital contract, signed 2 weeks ago, transferring part of the company's shares to a shell fund. The intermediary, a consultant who had already been investigated for fraud and who, coincidentally, had family ties to a man with the same last name as Renato. Leonardo grabbed his phone and called an old private intelligence contact, someone outside the police. Someone who didn't pretend to investigate, but actually uncovered the truth. "I need you to look into someone, Renato Silva, driver, and I want every place he's been in the last 30 days. On the other end, the reply was simple. "You'll find out what you should already know." Leonardo hung up, and in that moment, he decided he would trust no one anymore, except 2 people, his daughter, and the boy who, even coming from the streets, had never lied to him. Lucas had that fixed look again, the same one that appeared whenever something deeply disturbed him. Sitting on the park bench in front of Leonardo's house, he fidgeted with his shoelaces as his mind stitched together possibilities. He knew the truth, and he knew nobody would hear his voice unless he could prove it. Renato was the man from the warehouse. Of that, he had no doubt. But accusing someone like him, soft-spoken, steady posture, a clean record, would be like throwing a stone at a fortress. He needed something more. He walked to Leonardo's office, where Leonardo was reviewing reports. Lucas hesitated at the door. "Can I go out for a few hours?" Leonardo looked up, surprised. "By yourself?" "Just to one place. Nothing far. I promise I'll come back." Leonardo, reluctant, nodded. He was beginning to trust the boy, or maybe he already trusted him more than he cared to admit. Lucas slipped out the back door, an old cell phone in his pocket, and a voice recorder tucked under his t-shirt. It was an antique, but it still worked. Early that afternoon, Lucas went to the parking lot of a grocery store on the outskirts of town, where he knew Renato often stopped. He had watched Renato's car parked there several times, always under the shade of a tree. He waited for half an hour. Then he saw him. "Hey, Renato!" he called, running toward the man who was preparing to get into his car. Renato turned, surprised. "Lucas? I need to talk to you. It's important." The driver studied him with narrowed eyes, weighing him. "About what?" "About the warehouse, about what I know." Renato froze for a second. Then he gave a calm smile. "Get in. Let's talk calmly." Inside the car, the air conditioning hummed, and the engine's noise drowned out any outside sound. Lucas sat in the passenger seat, trying not to show his nerves. "What warehouse are you talking about?" Renato feigned ignorance. "The one where they left the girl, where I found her. I saw you there." A heavy silence followed. Renato backed out of the spot slowly. He drove down empty streets, steering away from the city center. Lucas began to sweat. "I just want to understand what happened," he said, trying to sound casual. "Who told you to do it?" Renato let out a dry laugh. "You're smart." Too smart for a homeless kid. He turned onto a dirt road behind an abandoned factory. The place looked deserted. "Are you going to turn me in?" Lucas glanced down at his pocket, where the recorder was bouncing against his leg as the car jostled. "I don't know. I just want to understand." Renato stopped the car. He turned off the engine. "Since you want to understand, listen closely." And then he spoke. "Of course, it was me. The kidnapping, the embezzlements, the digital signature, everything. I planned it for months. I know old Leonardo like the back of my hand. He trusted me so much that he would give me his passwords with his eyes closed." Lucas caught his breath. "Alice?" he asked in a nearly inaudible voice. "A distraction. A child disappears, and the world stops. While he was crying, I was cleaning out the safe. I just didn't expect you to show up. You ruined everything. Lucas already had what he needed. He tried to mask his urgency. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. The tone shifted. Renato slowly unbuckled his seatbelt, turned in his seat and stared at the boy. Do you know what happens to those who talk too much? 2 cars appeared behind the factory. Doors opened with sharp clicks. 2 men climbed out. Lucas bolted from the car and ran. He cut through the brush, climbed a fence and entered a vacant lot. The shouts chased him, but the footsteps soon fell behind. He ran as he ran through city streets, like someone who knew every alley, every pothole, every escape route. He reached downtown after almost an hour. His legs shook. The recorder was scratched, its cover loose, but it still pulsed a red light. It was alive, but would the audio still be intact? That night, Leonardo answered the door to find Lucas accompanied by another boy, older, crooked glasses, a laptop in his backpack. This is Tiago. He knows how to handle everything, even things the police don't know. Tiago only nodded. The recorder's messed up, but maybe I can salvage it. I'll need time. Leonardo led them to his office, where they set up an improvised workstation. As Tiago disassembled the device, Lucas recounted everything: the meeting, the confession, the men, the escape. Leonardo listened without interrupting, his blood boiling. "And you did this alone?" he asked finally. "Someone had to do it." Tiago removed the memory card from the recorder, plugged it into the laptop, and typed rapidly. "There's something here. It's corrupted, but I can rebuild it." The next few minutes were tense. Only the sound of keystrokes and their breathing filled the room. Then the sound, a raspy, familiar voice. Of course it was me. The kidnapping, the embezzlements. The audio was choppy, interspersed with static, but still intelligible. Tiago looked at Leonardo. "There's more. I can enhance it further." Leonardo closed his eyes. For the first time, he had something concrete, proof, maybe still incomplete, but enough to dismantle the wall of lies Renato had built so carefully. And Lucas had done what no one else had dared. The guest room had turned into a trench. Wires crisscrossed the floor like traps. The glow of the monitor reflected on Tiago's focused face, and the sharp clicks of the keyboard filled the stillness of the early morning. Lucas stood nearby, watching without blinking. Leonardo came in from time to time, bringing coffee, water, and anxious questions. How much longer? Tiago didn't take his eyes off the screen. "We're in. Now it's just a matter of finding what he doesn't want anyone to see." Tiago was 17, but he spoke and thought like someone who had already lived 2 decades of war. He came from the streets, like Lucas, but had found refuge in lines of code. And now he was the sharpest mind Leonardo could have on his side. "Renato was using a VPN," Tiago explained. "But I found a timing pattern. He always accessed the company systems in the middle of the night, always from a masked IP that showed up as a server in the US, but," he smiled, "the mask has flaws, and I set a trap." "What?" "A fake log, with a contract that doesn't exist. He saw it, logged in to check, and when he did, he opened a direct channel to me. Now I've got him on a leash." Leonardo sat down slowly, as if witnessing a miracle. "And what is he accessing?" Tiago opened a folder of recently captured files. Financial transaction reports, internal records, and communications. But not only that, he's not alone. He opened a new tab on the monitor and clicked on an audio file. "Listen to this." The recording was clear. "The board has already signed. The reception guard will let them in when it's time. Just 1 more week." That's Renato's voice," Tiago said. "And the other is the administrative director. They're talking about physical access to the company headquarters. Someone's going in to tamper with documents and wipe traces." Leonardo ran his hands over his face. The circle was larger than he'd imagined. This wasn't just a single attack, it was an infiltration on multiple levels. Names! I want names! Tiago pulled up a file of cross-referenced spreadsheets. Here. The director is Andre Fontes. He worked with Renato 10 years ago at another company, which coincidentally went bankrupt after a financial hole emerged. The guard is Julio Cesar, night shift, and there's another name in the logs, Fabiana Lopez. She's in accounting. Leonardo read the names one by one, all familiar faces, people he greeted in the elevator, folks he'd hired himself. What do they get out of this? Tiago shrugged. A cut of the profits, a slice of the downfall. Some people don't just want money. They want to see everything crumble. The next hours were frenetic. Tiago intercepted 3 more of Renato's connections, capturing encrypted files that he then decoded with software he'd created himself. This is a gem, he said, pointing to the screen. A complete plan, dates, embezzled amounts, offshore accounts, and another confession. Renato recorded everything, just in case. Irony, huh? Leonardo listened to the new recording with his eyes shut tight. Leonardo never noticed. He thought I was just the driver. Meanwhile, I was signing for him, controlling the company's cash flow, and even building a network of trust to infiltrate the others. And the girl? Just bait. She wasn't going to last long. Just long enough for him to lose focus. The silence after the recording was heavy. Lucas rose from the corner, his face drawn. I should have done more. I should have stopped him earlier. Leonardo looked at him firmly. You've already done more than any adult would have the courage to do. You're the one who brought Alice home, and now, with Tiago's help, you're saving so much more. Tiago compiled all the evidence into a digital dossier. Videos, audio files, screenshots, bank transfers, falsified logins, traced connections, everything. Leonardo spent the night printing documents, assembling folders, preparing not just to press charges, but to expose. He knew that inside the company there were allies of the enemy. He couldn't trust anyone except the 2 young people in that room with him. Before dawn, Leonardo called his personal attorney. I need you here, now, and bring a process server with you. Is something wrong? It's about to be. Prepare for the biggest corporate bombshell you've ever seen. Lucas and Tiago stepped outside to get some air in the backyard, while Leonardo organized the final files. I thought I'd never do anything important in my life, Tiago said, looking up at the still dark sky. But now, you've saved a company and a family. Tiago smiled almost shyly. Do you think he can win? Lucas glanced toward the office window, where Leonardo moved like a general about to go to war. He already has. He's just waiting for the right moment to show it. The sun hadn't risen yet when Leonardo walked down the hallway of the company with slow but steady steps. Beside him, his attorney carried a black briefcase heavy as a verdict. In Leonardo's hand was a small red flash drive, tiny, silent, but capable of blowing up an entire empire. Ahead of them, 2 process servers waited. Behind them, Lucas and Tiago stood like sentinels, watching. It was time. The first hours of the day were taken up by arrests. Andre Fontes, the administrative director, was summoned to the conference room and handed a warrant. He tried to protest, but had no time. The police were already on their way. Downstairs, security guard Julio Cesar was surprised by the arrival of internal affairs. When they tried to access the entry and exit logs, he simply ran and was apprehended before reaching the gate. Leonardo watched everything from the window of his office. The faces that had once greeted him with respect or flattery now avoided eye contact, as if they were complicit in the silence. And perhaps they were. The evidence Tiago had gathered was indisputable. Every illicit transfer, every remote login, every captured conversation was documented, stamped and dated. But the real bombshell came with the press conference. "We are facing one of the largest corporate frauds seen in recent years," announced the lead prosecutor, speaking with the authority of someone who understood the impact of his words. Local and national newspapers picked up the audio clips. Renato's confession leaked online in under an hour. "Of course it was me. The girl was just a distraction. The old man didn't even notice." Leonardo's name, once tainted by corruption rumors, now became synonymous with victimhood. Headlines shifted tone. Innocent businessman targeted in conspiracy by trusted employees. Ex-driver led criminal network inside billion-dollar corporation. Daughter used as bait in fraud. Conspiracy shocks the nation. Leonardo gave no interviews. He simply released a brief statement. "The truth always finds a way. My daughter is safe, and with her, my strength has been reborn." 2 days later, Renato was captured while trying to leave the state in a rented car. He was alone, dressed in everyday clothes, his face hidden under a baseball cap. He offered no resistance. He only said, "I spent 10 years building this, and a street kid ruined everything." He was led away in handcuffs under the glare of flashing cameras. Reporters swarmed him. No more words, only the silence of a man who had underestimated the courage of those who had nothing left to lose. Back at Leonardo's house, the atmosphere was different. Alice smiled more. She still slept with the light on, but no longer screamed at night. And when she heard about Renato's arrest, she ran into her father's arms with a single question. "He won't come back now, right?" Leonardo hugged her tightly. "Never again, sweetheart. Never again." In the yard, Lucas and Tiago sat in the shade, sharing a bag of popcorn and watching the news on their phones. "Did you see this?" Tiago asked, showing a video with over 1 million views. It was a news feature about the kid hacker and the street boy who helped expose a corporate scam. "We're famous," he said, laughing. Lucas simply gave a half smile. Fame meant nothing to him, but seeing Leonardo, Alice, and Tiago together at peace meant everything. That night, Leonardo gathered the 3 of them in the living room. He lit the fireplace, even though it was warm, and invited them to sit. "I owe you both a debt," he began, "and I'm not talking about money." He looked at Tiago. "You used your talent to protect my family, and that's worth more than anything money can buy." Then he turned to Lucas. "And you gave me my daughter back. You faced fear, faced danger, and still you stayed. I want you both to stay with us, if you want." Silence hung for a few seconds. Lucas was the first to speak. "I've never had a with us." Leonardo nodded. "Now you do." The next day, Leonardo went to the company to formalize the changes. He fired the remaining conspirators, restructured departments, and secured every access point. And he made sure to say out loud, "No one who operates in the dark will fool us again. From now on, everything here will be in the light." But what surprised him most was what he found when he returned home. Alice had drawn a new sign for the front door. "Faraz family, now with 2 brothers and a hacker." Leonardo laughed like he hadn't laughed in weeks. The storm had passed. What remained now was rebuilding, not just the company, but the bonds, the dreams, the life. Because in the end, it wasn't the necklace that had held it all together. It was the courage of those who refused to stay invisible. The morning's silence felt different now. It no longer carried the tension of the previous days, nor the shadow of fear. It was a silence of peace, of new beginnings. Leonardo's house, once too big, too cold, now felt full of life. Alice raced through the garden with a paper airplane. Tiago was busy adjusting the cables for a projector in the newly renovated hall. And Lucas watched everything with a mix of wonder and disbelief. It still took him some time to believe that this place was truly his home. That evening, Leonardo called him out to the porch. "You know you don't have to stay. You can go whenever you want. I just want you to know that the door is always open here." Lucas looked at him, his eyes slightly misty. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Leonardo nodded. "And if I told you that you could stay, not just as a guest, but as part of the family?" Lucas bit his lip. His chest felt too small to hold all the emotion he felt. I've never had a family. Not really. It's always been everyone for themselves. People disappearing, people hurting you, people forgetting you." He paused, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I always feared trusting, feared caring, and then losing. But now..." He raised his gaze, and for the first time, there was hope in his eyes. "Now I don't want to run away anymore." Leonardo reached out his hand. "Then stay, as my son, officially." Lucas didn't answer right away. He just stood up, took 2 steps, and threw himself into Leonardo's arms, holding on tight as if embracing a destiny he never imagined he'd have. The adoption process was faster than they expected. The publicity around the case, the media attention, and Leonardo's active involvement in social projects accelerated everything. At the hearing, Lucas held Leonardo's hand tightly. When the judge delivered the verdict, Alice, sitting beside them, shouted without thinking, "Now you're really my brother." Lucas laughed, and for the first time in a long while, he cried, not out of pain, but out of relief. The next morning, Leonardo entered Lucas's room and handed him a small box wrapped in a blue linen cloth. "This is yours. It always was." Lucas opened it. Inside lay the necklace, the white gold butterfly with its little pink stone, the piece that changed everything. That led him to Alice, that unraveled the web of lies, that rebuilt a family. "Alice wanted it to be yours," Leonardo said. Lucas took the necklace with care, as if it was something sacred. Then he looked at his father and murmured softly, "You found me, and you saved me too." Leonardo smiled. "We saved each other." A few weeks later, they officially inaugurated the social project. Its name, House of New Beginnings. It was a spacious facility, with dormitories, classrooms, a cafeteria, a library, and a computer lab, set up with Tiago's help, who now taught computer skills to young people living on the streets. Lucas was in charge of intake and screening. He used his story to talk to the children who arrived. He knew exactly how to touch each wound because he had carried those same scars himself. Alice, still little, helped however she could. She made posters, gave out hugs and candy, and proudly announced, "Lucas is my brother, and he's a hero." At the grand opening party, Leonardo took the stage with Lucas and Tiago by his side. "For a long time, I thought I was a whole man. I had money, status, power. But I didn't have the most important thing. I didn't have a real home." He looked at the 2 young men beside him. "These boys changed everything. They taught me what courage is, what loyalty is, and what unconditional love is." Applause filled the hall. The House of New Beginnings is more than a project. It's a symbol that no one is invisible, that everyone deserves to be seen and to be welcomed. That night, Lucas walked through the garden, the necklace hanging around his neck. He stopped in front of a photo wall they had put up at the entrance of the center. Among the pictures was the very first one, him, Alice, and Leonardo on the day of the adoption. In the background, the setting sun bathed the sky in golden hues. Alice appeared beside him, taking his hand. "I think God sent you because of the necklace, but now it's yours." Lucas looked at her. "Why?" "Because you found me. You saved Dad, and even you." He smiled. He squeezed her hand gently. And in that moment, he knew the world would never be the same. Because some families are born of blood, but others of choice. And this one was the strongest of all. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought about the story. See you in the next video.